Hello, my name is Jacob Dreiner. I'm not a surgeon, I'm an internist and an epidemiologist, and I work in the general management of Clalit Health Services, which is the largest HMO in Israel. Currently use the quality indicators. First of all, I'm going to give the general outline of my presentation. I'm going to talk about currently used quality indicators in Clalit. I'm going to talk about some epidemiologic analysis that we did on existing and candidate quality indicators. And I'm going to briefly talk about some quality indicators that come from the literature and from worldwide sources. So Clalit has gone through a process of decentralization in recent years. And in 2005, we initiated the project for quality assurance in hospitals affiliated with Clalit. The project focuses on 5 domains, which include clinical quality of care, quality of service, costs, patient throughput, academic excellence, and quality indicators are used for each of these domains. The Clalit has developed a centralized database that combines administrative, laboratory, and clinical data from patients' files. We don't have a computerized clinical file, but we can link to diagnosis, laboratory values, administrative data like length of stay, readmissions, and so on. And we've used evidence-based clinical QIs chosen by expert groups based on the existing literature and feasibility within the database. QIs are reported at the department level and are used to build an annual work plan with quantitative targets and indicators. The system allows benchmarking of the performance of each department to other departments within the organization. This is how it looks like. We have a designated software for that. And you can see that this is the screen for clinical indicators in surgery. You have the name of the indicator, the score, the actual performance in these specific indicators. What was the performance in the previous period, whether the trend is upgoing or downgoing or about the same, what is the goal that the department set for itself, and we can see later on that we can drill down into patients' files and gain more insight about that. So this is data about readmission within 1 month to the department, and it's in one of the surgical departments in the organization. And you can see the period that the data relates to. We have the numerator, the denominator, we have the actual performance in a graphic interface. We can see what is the rank of the department within the organization. In this case, it's the 3rd out of 15 departments. We can see the trend over a certain period and see whether we are improving or not. This is another an example for excessive lengths of stay following laparoscopic cholecystectomy. And if we want to understand what has happened and why have 8 patients stayed longer than was planned, we can drill down into the patient's files. You see this red circle over here, and we can get a list of all the patients, see when were they admitted and when were they discharged. We have the patient's ID, of course, hidden for this presentation, but on the actual software, you have the patient's ID, and you can go into his file. This is, for example, a case that was had an excessive length of stay, and you can see the actual discharge letter in Hebrew. I translated it for the presentation. And this is a 41-year-old man that was admitted for cholecystectomy. And a few days later, his hemoglobin level dropped to 7. He received 2 units of blood, and CT scan showed a perihepatic hematoma. So you can gain insight to why was this patient in the department longer than usual, and if you see that this is a repeat problem, you can do something about it. This is another example which is related to defined daily dose for broad spectrum antibiotics, and we see our performance in this specific indicator, and in this case we can gain insight into the actual antibiotics that we used. We can see the list of antibiotics, what is the cost. This is hidden for commercial reasons, I'm sorry. We can see the defined daily dose and how many doses and what is the average cost for this drug and so on. So I told you I'm an internist. I have to give some sarcasm for the surgeons. And the next issue I'm going to speak about is multivariate analysis of certain topics related to these clinical indicators. How can we choose the right quality indicators? There are some criteria. It should be clinically relevant. It should be popular in other quality indicator systems worldwide. It should be reliable, feasible, something that we can actually change in better practice, cost-effective, evidence-based, really dependent on the physician or the department, not on the hospital or the organization. Something that is actually viable within departments, not all departments do the same, and associated with significant outcomes. So what we did was a multivariate analysis of quality indicators in general surgery. We chose 2 topics, which are cholecystectomy and colectomy for cancer. Before we started the analysis, we had quality indicators related to excessive lengths of stay, reoperation, and ERCP following cholecystectomy. And we thought about potential new indicators from the literature that we wanted to include. The questions for this analysis were, how frequent is the event? Is the data really reliable? Is there any significant variability within departments? To what extent does the indicator depend on patient case mix? Everybody says it's not my fault, my patients are older, they are more sick, and so on. Is the event related to outcomes like mobility, mortality, length of stay, cost, and so on? And we wanted to choose QIs that are reliable, variable, minimally affected by case mix, and related to outcomes. For the cholecystectomy database, the following QIs were found to be useful. First one is excessive length of stay following laparoscopic cholecystectomy. It was highly variable within the 14, we had 14 departments in Clalit performing over 2,000 cholecystectomies in 2007, and it was highly variable the average was 19%. It was independent of case mix, and it was associated with outcomes like cost, and I can also say mortality to some extent. Whether the cholecystectomy was an open procedure or a laparoscopic procedure was also very variable. The average was 85%, and it was also independent of case mix, and it was also associated with outcomes like cost and length of stay. Laparoscopic cholecystectomy converted to an open procedure. This was with an average 7%, again, independent of case mix and associated with outcomes. So we decided to cancel some of the previously included quality indicators that the experts chose based on the literature, like reoperations following laparoscopic cholecystectomy, reoperations following open cholecystectomy, excessive lengths of stay following open cholecystectomy, and ERCP following cholecystectomy. Why were these canceled? Because they were either very rare or everyone was doing quite the same and quite well, and it was not dependent on any, not related to any important outcomes. One of the indicators was retained, you can see it, and two new indicators were added. We did the same analysis for colectomy for cancer. Here we had about 1,000 procedures for 2007 in 14 departments. And we chose to use the length of stay following colectomy, which was, again, highly variable. The mean was between 8 and 12 days. And it was, again, independent of case mix, associated with outcomes. Laparoscopic colectomy rate, I know this topic is controversial, but we showed that it was really variable with a mean of 20% and a very large variance. It was, again, independent of case mix and associated with outcomes like length of stay, cost, and mortality. And again, instead of choosing reoperations in general, we chose the specific procedures that were potentially related to the first procedure. Again, this was highly variable, independent of case mix, and associated with outcomes. So we decided to cancel 2 indicators, add these 3 indicators that I was talking about. There were many indicators from the literature that we could not use, like complications, duration of procedure, and so on, because the data were not really reliable because they were dependent on diagnosis written in the discharge letter. The last topic I'm going to talk about is sources for new potential quality indicators. There are many internet sources for quality indicators in surgery. For example, the Agency for Healthcare Research and Quality, Centers for the Medicare and Medicaid in the United States, the NHS in the UK, and so on. You can see this list with relevant websites. And we see that they deal with several topics, like I'm not going to bore you with all the list of indicators. This is just a few highlights. Preoperative care, like prophylactic antibiotics, whether it was administered 1 hour before the procedure, whether the right type of prophylactic antibiotics was given, whether it was stopped within 24 hours, VTE prophylaxis, whether it was ordered and actually administered, efficiency, like day surgery versus in-hospital surgery, admission following day surgery, surgical theater use, length of stay, indicators for the outpatient clinic, like non-attendance, and new versus follow-up ratio. Operative and post-operative complications, complications like lacerations, foreign bodies, post-operative sepsis, respiratory failure, wounded dehiscence, VTE, hemorrhage, and so on. Outcomes like emergency readmissions, avoidable mortality, and for hernia, reoperation within 5 years. There are some indicators for specific procedures like upper GI bleeding, esophageal resection, pancreatic resection, appendicitis, and cholecystectomy. And that's it. That's about it. Thank you very much.